Hello, darling. Did you miss me? I missed you. Can't help myself. Today, once again, as usual, we're dealing with people who are wrong on the interwebs. A couple of caveats before we crash straight into Christopher Walker's video entitled Lose Weight, Eating Sugar? ? Sugar obesity myth exposed. Sounds great. Sounds awesome. Can't wait. Here are the caveats. Number one, I will be pausing this video often, and sometimes it'll be in the middle of a sentence. This is an educational video. I'll be making corrections to things that are wrong, and I'll be explaining why I'm saying them. If that's triggering for you, and if you'd rather just listen to Christopher Walker uninterrupted, go and watch his video, in which case you also won't learn a damn thing. But that's up to you. You might as well click off this video now in that case and go and do that. If, however, you'd like to learn something from someone who knows something about it, yours truly, stick around. Number two, this won't be in my usual style of being abrasive and sweary. Maybe I will be slightly abrasive in places, but it won't be sweary. It's my new style. I did warn you that would be changes upcoming. They're here. So if it triggers you just to hear facts and science and stuff and decent reasoning and logic, you probably should click off now and go and watch my old videos where I'm swearing at people. If, however, you're here for the learning, then stick around because we're going to be teaching Christopher Walker a lesson, I hope. That is, if he watches this video and has enough self-awareness to realise how far off the mark he actually is. Third caveat, by the way, is I actually have seen this through, so I know what he's going to say. Anyway, there won't be any shocks or surprises for me, therefore. Right, let's crack on. Christopher.
Sugar is the ultimate antioxidant.
False. There you go, straight away. We didn't last very many seconds at all, did we? No, it isn't, Christopher. That's false. Who told you that? Why do you say that? On the basis of what? According to whom, that is. No? Okay.
It's a big claim, right?
Yes, it is, and it's false. Demonstrably, unassailably, absolutely, completely false.
Before people get their panties in a bunch, let me explain something to you.
Oh, please do. Tell us all about the science.
When I say sugar, I'm referring to glucose and fructose.
Okay, glucose and fructose, yes.
Not referring to or advocating donuts, cakes, and all manner of foodstuffs people commonly associate with the word sugar.
Right, well, do they contain sugar? Yes. Are you inferring that those things are vastly worse than pure refined sugar on the basis that they contain fats? Because a mixture of fats and carbohydrates is not a good thing, according to Sir Philip Randall, 1963. We've known about it that long. Almost nobody's heard of it, but there you go. Seed oils, which, in my opinion, are absolutely, utterly contraindicated anywhere near the human body. And all sorts of plant toxins, contraindicated unnecessary fiber, anti-nutrients, pro-inflammatory substances that you'll find in plants. In which case you'd be right, Christopher. Absolutely, this highly processed, highly refined, highly palatable junk food is absolutely worse than pure sugar, yes. However, if that's your logic for saying, therefore sugar is exonerated because it's not as bad, then we're going to have a problem. And having seen this video, you and I are going to have a problem, Christopher. Okay? Brace yourself, Christopher. I hope you are watching.
People rarely ever consume sugar in its pure form.
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time you ate a spoonful of raw coconut or maple sugar, real honey or royal jelly? For many of you, probably never. Everyone loves to demonize sugar as the cause of obesity, yet...
That's an opinion, Christopher. Everyone does no such thing. I don't do that. Ergo, your statement is wrong.
When you analyze both the research and the actual biochemistry of the human...
Yeah, well, having seen this video through, Christopher, I can assure viewers up front that you have absolutely no ability, capacity, scientific discipline, knowledge, or experience to actually do so at all. You're completely out of your lane. You're completely incompetent for reasons I'm going to get to. And as such, you absolutely ought to stop making these videos immediately. Sorry about that. It's just the facts. Now, what he's going to do here is he's going to splash these 6 figures here out of some paper somewhere, completely out of any context whatsoever. He's going to say nothing whatsoever about them. He's going to analyze them in no way, form whatsoever. He's not going to talk about the paper from which they came. He's not going to do an in-depth analysis of anything whatsoever. As such, this is just filler. Unlike my movies, videos, which are all killer and no filler. This is just filler. There's nothing to see here. This establishes nothing whatsoever.
Human body, you start to see a very different picture unfold.
Yeah, well, that's an opinion. A very different picture, you say. Great. Paint a different picture for us, Christopher. We're waiting.
With some extremely convincing evidence to the contrary.
Scientists, competent ones, do not say extremely convincing evidence. Why not? Because what they do is they collect extremely convincing evidence, and then they report that extremely convincing evidence in the literature, allowing their data to stand on its own 2 feet and be extremely convincing. What you're doing, Christopher, is mindlessly regurgitating and parroting the opinions of the authors and others who are saying this is extremely convincing, which is an entirely anti-scientific thing to do, because science, my friend, is litigated empirically. That means with numbers, not with opinions about what's convincing and what isn't. What I can tell you about human nutrition science, and I'll give it that one, as that relates to any hard health outcome of any kind over any reasonable period of time in human beings, as that relates to any aspect of dietary intervention or dietary lifestyle in any way, shape, or form, there's just none. It does not exist. Science is properly designed, properly tenured, properly controlled, properly observed, disciplined, experimental procedure. That is the epistemology here. If you don't have that, which we don't, because ethics committees hate that kind of stuff on humans, you can't experiment on humans. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. What you have is theology, propaganda, consensus, opinion. What you don't have is extremely convincing evidence. What you have is no evidence as that relates to hard health outcome. None. Still. Okay? So let's move on.
In today's video, I'm going to explore the science of sugar.
Well, you're going to make an attempt at it. What you're actually going to do is give us opinions, theology, belief structures, consensus, and a bunch of other nonsense. What you're not going to do is even point to any science, because it's still absent.
This is an appropriate topic, especially since we've been digging into the thermo diet and looking deeply at the flaws in the keto diet, and therefore...
Okay, do you see how that's an opinion? The flaws in the keto diet. What are they, Christopher? According to whom? On the basis of what?
Differences between a glucose metabolism and a fatty acid metabolism.
Mm-hmm.
And so far we've seen how preferable and efficient glucose metabolism is for hormonal health and a healthy metabolism.
Okay, see how that is nothing more than a theologically based, propaganda-based opinion. Once again, science is litigated empirically, and what you have not done is support that statement you've just made with any empirical evidence. Okay? Not good enough, Christopher.
A lot of the propaganda around the keto diet...
Projection, the propaganda you say. Projection.
...involves the demonization of sugar and a glucose metabolism.
Okay, there you go. Demonization. That is a value judgment statement. That's an emotive construct. That's an idea about the motives of folks. What it is not is empirical evidence establishing a posit one way or the other on whether or not a person should eat any amount of sugar, and if so, how much. Okay?
Even though this is biochemically unsound.
Says who? Again, according to what? Just an opinion. Again.
And a fatty acid keto metabolism has far more negative consequences on the...
There are no established negative consequences of fatty acid metabolism. Not one. Show me a study that proves me wrong on that. We won't wait, because we'll die waiting. It does not exist, still.
The human body due to the stressful hormonal shift required for it.
Stressful hormonal shift, another value judgment statement, another opinion, another theological talking point. Define stress, Christopher. Give me an externally valid operational definition of stress. Now delineate that from distress somehow. Good luck.
Now it's time to bust some myths about sugar that you might
let's bust some myths. Go on, Christopher. We can't wait.
Still be clinging to, thanks to the hearsay and mass media's propaganda.
Again, with the brain fog, the repetition. You said that already, remember? Not that long ago.
And relentless demonization of sugar.
Nonsense. Just utter rubbish, Christopher. Not a single reference to anything remotely scientific there.
Let's begin.
Yes, let's.
So first off, sugar does not equal baked goods.
You haven't said that already either, have you? We know. We understand. Ergo, sugar is exonerated from being a problem? No. Still.
Does not equal candy bars, soft drinks, and anything else people commonly associate it with.
You've said that as well already. Do you really think that everybody that's watching your video has an IQ under about 40? We got you the first time. It was stupid the first time. Sorry, let's just move on.
It's not the same thing.
Oh my God, seriously? But it'd be great if you could tell us whether it's not the same thing, because we're still confused.
All these foodstuffs are nothing more than nutrient-void garbage food that should be
completely unlike sugar, which is not nutrient-void, unnecessary, and therefore could be defined easily as garbage, given that the exact dietary requirement for exogenous carbohydrate, biologically, in the human system, is not 1 single gram ever, because of a funky little thing called gluconeogenesis, which I'm sure you'll refer to because, well, it's in every single textbook. It's one of the first things you learn in your first half an hour of your undergraduate degree in nutrition, if you've even done one of those, Christopher. I don't know. I don't know who you are.
Consumed sparingly, if at all. This is the real crime in implicating sugar as something that's bad for the body.
See, crime, again, that's a value judgment statement. It's an opinion. And it's nonsense.
Because the baby gets thrown out with the bathwater.
Okay, so give us a ridiculous analogy, an adage, a hackneyed old talking point there, which is completely inept, completely incompetent, and doesn't refer at all in any way to anything of any value.
People, by association, demonize fruit, honey, royal jelly, and even just simple raw cane sugar with zero real evidence for its negative effects in the
Okay, so again with the ridiculous theology, demonization, the value judgment statements, demonization, suggesting that there's no evidence of negative effects of any of these things, without giving us the full picture, which is that there's no evidence of positive effect either. However, if you apply a competent, holistic, experienced, and sensible approach to looking at the actual biochemistry, the actual science, the actual inferences such that they are that do exist, then you will be able to see and understand the reasons why sensible folks such as yours truly are suggesting to people that ideally the amount of sugar and carbohydrates in all forms and plant materials in all forms that you should intake, ideally, is about none. Zero is the goal. Now, in practice, people are not going to achieve that. I understand that. Hardly anybody can. However, that's what we should aim for. That's what's ideal, apparently. It seems. That's my opinion. My opinion based on a significantly better understanding, it seems, of science, its disciplines, its strengths, its weaknesses, its flaws, and its foibles than yours, Christopher. Yes, I'm bigging myself up. Yes, I'm claiming authority. But it's actually earned. The runs are on the board if people want to go and check. You won't find everything about me because that's the way I like it, my past, etc. But you'll find enough to establish that I actually am credible and do know what I'm talking about. You don't need to do that anyway. You just need to listen to what I've got to say and you'll get it. That this is a bloke, me, who knows what he's talking about. Doesn't have to be opinion that you share, but nonetheless, it would seem fairly unassailable. If you think that you could prevail in a debate-style discussion versus myself, Christopher, that'll be great. We'll keep it respectful. We won't swear at each other or whatever. We'll hear each other out. We won't talk over each other. It'll be awesome. Your viewers and mine will get a lot out of it. And the numbers for such events are going to be pretty good because actually there are very few people out there who have the gear, the stones, if you like, the intestinal fortitude to actually front me. The only ones that do seem to be the ones that are absolutely dripping in Dunning-Kruger or are so patently, clearly, obviously destitute that it's just a joke. It's just laughable and nobody gets anything out of it except some humour. So there's a challenge for you. Right, what's next?
Context of an otherwise solid, hormonally focused diet like we talk about on this channel.
See, a solid, hormonally focused diet. What is that, Christopher? Define that for us. And again, if you're going to define that for us and tell us what that is, I'm going to say to you, great. Says who? On the basis of what? See how this is going to work? You're going to have to be prepared to back up the claims that you make. And you're not going to be able to do it.
And in my books.
Oh, well, if you've written some books, you must be right. I haven't written any books. I've written chapters in peer-reviewed textbooks. I've written a significant number of peer-reviewed publications in the various journals. I've undertaken a couple of pretty hefty external consultancies and a number of other moderately sized consultancies in terms of the income generated, unfortunately, for the universities I was working for at the time rather than for myself. It's a pyramid scheme, you know, working for somebody else. Yeah. Anyway, so you wrote some books. Great. What you haven't done, Christopher, is actually educate yourself to the actual realities of what there is available by way of inference about human nutrition, etc.
Rarely do people fully understand what sugar is and how it acts in the body and how much it really contributes to obesity, inflammation, hormones, etc.
That statement, that sentence is correct from start to finish. Stand alone, yes.
And now that we've moved over from blaming saturated fat for all of our health problems, we need a new thing to demonize and blame.
Okay, once again with the theology about demonization. And no, we haven't. We, meaning society at large. There are still a preponderance, there is still a majority of those who claim to be competent professionals in the field who are still claiming saturated fat and or cholesterol is the cause of a number of different pathologies. We haven't shifted off that. It's still false, and I agree with you, Christopher, that it's false. But to say that we've moved off that now, no, we haven't. Who told you that?
Blame for our obesity and health problems. Sugar's the perfect target, and it certainly gets its share of a bad rap already.
Okay, so you get more opinions, you get more theology.
But did you know that even though we try to blame sugar for everything and say that we are getting fatter and fatter due to increased sugar usage, the science actually shows that sugar consumption has dropped during this period of time, that the obesity rates have dramatically risen?
No, it doesn't, Christopher. That is false. The science shows no such thing, in fact. What you're going to tap is a inference made about the consumption of sugar on the basis of respondent data in a survey. Not good enough. It establishes no such thing. It also talks about refined sugar, specifically, ignoring completely all those other things that people consume that absolutely do break down to the exact same molecules in the blood, irrespective of all the other nonsense that you get along with the hyperpalatable, hyperprocessed fat and sugar mixtures, polyunsaturates, etc., toxins, all of that. This is an invalid claim. It's false, it's incompetent, and this is a clear exemplar of all the reasons why I'm going to repeatedly say to you, Christopher, in this video, you need to stop making videos in this area of epistemology. You are not a competent commentator. You're a theologian. You're a bloke with strong opinions, which apparently change. Wow.
One study calls this the Australian paradox.
There you go.
During the time frame of 1980 to 2003, obesity rates tripled in the country, yet the intake of refined sugar dropped by 23%.
No, that's not supported by this study. This is not a study that measured the sugar intake of the Australian population. I don't know how many Australians were alive during those years, but I can promise you that not every one of them was observed 24/7.
Heck, I certainly have given my fair share of negative press on sugar in the past.
Excuse me scratching my nose every 3 seconds. I have reacted to something out there in the farm, probably a pollen of some kind. I didn't react badly to that, or, some kind of something I've come in contact with, it seems. Anyway, carry on.
Years before I really looked at the data, because I was listening to other people that I shouldn't have been listening to. But
and you still are, it seems, because you're still not able to competently comment on what the science, the epistemology of human nutrition knowledge is even capable of informing us on, let alone getting your conclusion, opinion correct. Still. And what you're doing here is another example of splashing up part of a paper out of context that you're not going to dive into, you're not going to analyze in depth, you're not going to tell us its strengths, its weaknesses, its flaws, its foibles. You're not going to challenge the thing at all in any way. You're just going to splash it up on the screen and suggest to us that it supports your posit in some way. It doesn't.
Over the years, as my knowledge and my understanding of scientific literature has vastly improved.
Perhaps it has. Nonetheless, you still have a huge distance to go, Christopher. A huge distance to go. I'm sorry to have to be so harsh. Sorry, not sorry. But at the end of the day, as soon as a person like you makes these kind of videos, publishes them as authoritative, so-called, instructional, so-called, and influencing people's opinions about the science, so-called, you are fair game. You've made yourself fair game for the sharp end of my tongue. Because you are simply not competent. It's not good enough. It needs to stop. Okay?
I've come to realize that my initial thoughts about sugar being unhealthy were for the most part inaccurate assumptions based largely on the popular opinion and validation of my own beliefs of the time.
Well, let me tell you the parable of one, not really a Dr. Paul Saladino, who I call Dr. Salad I don't know, or not a Dr. Salad I don't know more accurately. Trained psychiatrist, never practiced, not a single day in his life, in any field of medicine actually, ergo probably calling himself doctor while he's legally entitled to. It's a bit disingenuous, to be fair. Just like not a Dr. Gregor, same deal, actually. That said, it's a bit irrelevant, really. Here's the point. He said, absolutely, unequivocally, definitely, he knew the answer. He wrote a book about it, so he must be right too. He said the carnivore diet is absolutely the way to go, despite the fact that his particular brand, his particular take on what exact kind of diet that should be was wrong and was always going to lead him to problems. Hey presto, it did lead him to problems. Now he's turned around and said, I was wrong. Now I'm right. What you need to do is pour hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of grams of sugar down your neck every day. Okay? You're doing the same thing here. You're saying, I was wrong before and now I'm right. Well, number one, Paul was right in the first place if he'd actually just sorted out the problems with his particular brand of the diet. The things he did wrong, Okay? And now he's wrong. And what he's saying is, I was wrong and now I'm right. That's completely 180 degrees out of phase with the correct interpretation of whether he was right or wrong and when. You're doing exactly the same thing. Okay? You were right to suggest that sugar can absolutely be a problem and is a problem over a certain individual threshold, which depends on individual factors, genetics, and the environment in which those genes are placed ongoingly at any given time and throughout the course of the existence of that individual. Okay? Secondarily, if that's a word, to that, secondly, a person, any person who comes online, makes videos, authoritatively, definitely says this is how it is, and then changes their tune and says I was wrong, now I'm right, needs to be ignored, completely ignored. Because if you're capable of being wrong once, who's to say you're not wrong again? As it turns out, in my opinion, based on significant understanding, as I said, you're wrong. You're saying sugar is no problem. Well, that's irresponsible and false demonstrably. It's not good enough. As soon as you have to change your tune because you're shown to be wrong, your credibility is done. It's in the toilet. You're finished here. As such, that's yet another reason why you need to shut down your channel and stop making these videos, Christopher. You'll notice if you look through my catalogue of videos over the last 7 years or so, what you are going to find is that on anything of any importance whatsoever, my tune is the same as it was 7 years ago. And 7 years from now, should I be lucky enough to be still relevant on the YouTubes or still able to make videos, it will be the same then. It's not going to change because I adopted an unassailable, correct interpretation in the first place, because I'm competent. Okay? Right, I hope that makes that point clear, and I hope that's going up some flagpoles. I'm hoping that this is a learning experience for everybody. Carry on, Christopher, absolutely.
I'm thankful for the fact that I can admit my failures and open myself up to new evidence to form an opinion.
Okay, well, there is no new evidence still. And if you admit your failures, then you need to admit that you're in error now. And as such, act responsibly according to that, which, as I've said, is to stop making videos immediately and permanently.
With that being said, I don't have much at stake for this sugar thing. Think about the people who have written best-selling books in low-carb diets, paleo, and the evils of sugar. Will they be able to actually admit to their readers that what they believe was right might actually have been inaccurate and a manifestation of their own beliefs at the time? Now, most people...
So all you're doing there is backing up my point as to the reasons why you should stop.
People will never admit this at this point because they have way too much to lose for building a career off of inaccurate assumptions. And this is likely one of the reasons it took so long for the saturated fat and dietary cholesterol myths to actually subside.
They haven't subsided still. There is a burgeoning, growing population of people who are now fully appraised of the fallacious nature of those claims, but it is still the prevailing dogma. Please be accurate about the state of the match, if you like, the match situation.
Well, let's not get sidetracked, however. Back to sugar, health, and hormones.
Yes, let's.
So first off, what is sugar? Sugars are naturally occurring carbohydrates that provide energy for the body in the form of glucose and fructose.
Okay, so saying naturally occurring adds nothing. Everything is naturally occurring. We are part of nature. Everything that exists because it's natural. Okay?
Your brain, for example, requires roughly 130 grams of glucose on a daily basis to cover the most basic energy needs.
Okay, number one, no, it's nothing to do with energy still. Energy is still a construct. Energy is still that thing we have to invoke in order to make any kind of sense of the objective realities that we observe. And number two, yes, our brains do require glucose, as do our testes, as do various other tissues. However, gluconeogenesis is still a thing. It's still a reality. It still provides it. Ergo, the exact requirement for exogenous carbohydrates in the human diet remains exactly the same as it was last time I mentioned it, which is still none.
The major internal organs, glands, and muscles all use glucose as their main energy source.
No, well, yes, that is conditionally correct. Conditionally correct. Okay?
Deprive your body from this, it will try to make up for it by a process called gluconeogenesis.
Okay, number one, you can't deprive yourself, assuming you are not an uncontrolled type 1 diabetic. You cannot deprive yourself of glucose because gluconeogenesis achieves it. It doesn't try, it's what it does. Do. Not try. That's my best Yoda. Sorry about that. That's why it's there, for that purpose. It achieves it. Okay?
Which in the body, it breaks down protein and fatty acids to create glucose.
Protein only in a very, very emergency situation when there's basically no fat substrates left to speak of. Why would your body break down hard-earned gains of protein if there's any fat at all available? After 3,800 million years of evolution, why would the body be so inane? It isn't. Okay?
If you do this long enough and your body goes into ketosis, which surely has some benefits in terms of fasting, it's also just...
Okay, that's just ignorant. You said surely it has benefits, which isn't established. And you seem to be implying that it's only useful if you're not eating any food at all, which is nonsense. Ketosis is a normal, natural part of the human metabolic pathways. It is up and down regulated, even throughout the course of a day, according to needs at that time. There's no stress or distress involved in that. It's an evolved pathway that does exactly what it's supposed to do.
Just another form of metabolic stress.
No, it isn't. That's your opinion, and it's not based in any form of science of any kind. It's nonsense, Christopher.
That is designed to occur during the glucose deprivation.
You're still not being deprived because gluconeogenesis is still a thing. Go and look in a textbook.
Almost all carbohydrates, starches, and sugars break down to glucose.
Ah, you do understand that. Okay.
The simplest form of sugar.
According to whom, on the basis of what? What do you mean by simple? See, it's not scientific, is it? It's theological wordsmithing.
Ingestion.
It's propaganda.
The rate at which this happens is measured by the glycemic index or the...
No, it isn't. In fact, that's ridiculous. That's nonsense. The glycemic index suffers from a noise to signal ratio problem that is so massive as to make the glycemic index of no utility, and scientifically, epistemologically, and by way of statistical inference making, laughable. If you take two separate individuals and you expose them to the exact same bolus of carbohydrate, you will get two totally different numbers. And yet, the same number is applied to the same carbohydrate bolus for everybody. Ridiculous. Secondly, if you take a person, any individual, and you repeatedly on subsequent days or whatever else, if you give them the same bolus of carbohydrate again and again and again and again, even if you attempt to control most other likely confounding covariates, collinearities, and confounders, what you will get is a whole bunch of different results that are so different from each other as to make this laughable. The glycemic index, take-home message, does not measure the rate at which the body reacts to carbohydrates at all. Nonsense.
Glycemic load.
Glycemic load is merely a measurement of the amount, the absolute amount of a carbohydrate multiplied by the effective so-called glycemic index of that carbohydrate. Ergo, just as invalid and laughable. A competent scientist who understands statistics, statistical inference, statistical power, repeatability, reliability issues knows this. A ridiculous trained monkey grinder, a theologian, a propagandist doesn't know this. One of them should be educating the public about carbohydrates, and one of them should remain silent. Okay?
Although low carbers tried for years to confuse average people into
Yes, that's what they did. They tried to confuse people. Now, what you're suggesting, by way of your theology, is that you understand the motivations of everybody who's ever said that carbohydrates are likely to be a problem. Ridiculous. Yet more theology.
Believing that low glycemic index would be it for weight loss, research showed time and again that it was the total energy intake of calories, not...
Just when you thought it couldn't get any worse. Number one, energy is a construct and cannot be intaken or consumed. Calories are a form of energy, heat energy in this case specifically. That's how they are defined, that is how they are measured, that is how they are detected, that is what they are, and nothing else. Calories, being heat energy, are manifest in our objective reality such that we believe reality to be a thing. They are manifest as excitations of the electromagnetic field. The electromagnetic field has zero rest mass, ergo so does a perturbation of that field. Ergo it does not interact with the Higgs field. Ergo it has no inertia. Ergo there is no mass emergent from the lack of inertia. Ergo it, whatever you try to do to force it to do anything different, will piss off at 186,000 miles per second in every frame of reference. Ergo, you cannot consume them. They cannot be brought to rest. Those are the scientific facts. That is the physics. You need to educate yourself, and you need to do that in silence, Christopher. My dear grandmother and my dear mother in turn, in the case of my grandmother, used to say to me, and my mother still does, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. That is the proportion in which they ought to be used, Christopher. You will never learn anything while you are spouting off about what you think you know. And as regards human nutrition, basic physics, energetics, what you seem to know is not a damn thing. You don't have grasp of even the most basic first principles. It's simply not acceptable for you to be making videos. Still.
Not the glycemic index that is behind our ability to gain or lose body fat.
Okay. So energy balance tells us how much mass we're going to have. Again, what is the weight of energy? And particularly energy in the form of heat energy, which is a form of kinetic energy, which is, as I said, the electromagnetic field perturbation, the photon. What is the mass of that? And how does that affect your mass? Christopher, it doesn't. Okay, basic common sense, basic physics here. All right? Goodness gracious.
Now, the most common kinds of sugar in our diet include glucose, which is the simplest form of sugar in the main energy.
Again, repeating the same fallacious statement that's not qualified or backed up doesn't make it correct. According to whom, on the basis of what?
Provider in the cells in the body. The blood sugar in your veins is also glucose. There's fructose, which is found naturally in fruits and honey.
Yeah, interesting, because fructose has got one less carbon unit in it than has glucose. Wouldn't that make it more simple, depending on your definition of simple? Okay, just saying words again, Christopher. See how silly that is? It's ridiculous.
It's much sweeter than glucose and is metabolized in the liver instead of in the gut.
Well, again, that's conditionally correct. Well, actually, it's false. An amount, proportionally a small amount, but an amount nonetheless of the fructose that is consumed does indeed get taken up and metabolized by the gut. Most of it goes to the liver, you are correct, but not all of it, about which you are incorrect.
Now there's sucrose, which is table sugar. It's about 50% fructose and 50% glucose.
Again, that depends on how you define 50%. Of what? The mass? The number of carbon units? Or molecularly, in which case it's exactly 50% because it's one of each. Which?
You can get it extracted from beets or sugarcane. Sucrose occurs naturally in...
Again, with the naturally thing, yeah.
Vegetables and fruits. And then there's lactose, which is milk sugar. It's found in milk and dairy products naturally.
Again, naturally, so it must be good.
Also maltose, which is found in malted drinks and beer.
So beer is good because it's natural. Because alcohol is natural too. That exists in nature. It existed before humans worked out how to make a whole bunch of it and consume it for recreational purposes. Also, alcohol is one of the macronutrients. So you're probably going to tell us that balance is good. I know you are, later. In which case, well, we should just have the exact same amount of fat, carbohydrate, protein, and alcohol in our diet, shouldn't we? Good.
Now, the studies looking into the effects of sugar on various health parameters...
There are no studies looking into the effects of any hard health outcome whatsoever. Effect is the conjugate of cause. There are no studies of a decently controlled, decently designed, decently powered, tenured, disciplined, observed, experimental metabolic ward lock-in study that can inform us on how health outcomes of any kind. Still,
parameters often use pure fructose, pure glucose, or sucrose. In our normal daily lives, the majority of the sugars we consume come in a balance of about 50% glucose.
You've said that already, and it was still questionable.
50% fructose. The main difference between glucose and fructose is the fact that the latter is metabolized in the liver.
Again, with the repetition of facts that are actually not facts.
And is more rapidly absorbed.
According to whom, on the basis of what, and in what way?
So there's some real health benefits of sugar.
Oh, are there? Let's hear about those.
Due to the demonization of sugar, it might...
Again? No. Nonsense.
Seem a bit crazy to claim that sugar consumption would actually have health benefits.
Well, it would be crazy to claim that anything that we can consume has demonstrable health benefits in terms of hard health outcomes in humans over any period of time, because no evidence to support any such claim, irrespective of what you're talking about, exist. Still.
It does definitely seem that way.
According to whom? On the basis of what?
However, there's evidence to the contrary. So
no, there isn't. Still.
Why would the source of energy that the body...
No. Still. Not energy. Human metabolism, and the metabolism of all living things, in fact, functions via the interactions of different forms of mass, which I understand is a form of energy, yes, according to E equals mc squared. Yes. However, metabolism of living organisms does not break mass into energy, neither does it create mass from energy. The balance of mass in a human body And the functions, the metabolic functions of the human body, all function according to the interaction of various forms of mass. Still,
it naturally prioritizes be harmful for us. Why?
Naturally prioritizes sugar is what he just said. Okay. If you pour two things into your body, one of which is toxic and one of which is not, and your body has an ability to process one of those things out of your blood, which requires you to slow down the rate at which the other one is processed, the non-toxic one, what do you think the body's going to do? That's right.
Why would the most easily attainable naturally occurring foods like berries or fruit, which are
naturally occurring, so it must be good. Again, the same ridiculous, fallacious argument that has absolutely no basis in even relatively decent logic. Still,
are loaded with simple sugars, be the cause of our ever-increasing weight and health problems? And lastly, why
well, it depends because, as I said earlier, that's the dose that makes the poison.
These problems have skyrocketed, all while our consumption of sugar has actually decreased.
Saying actually before making a statement doesn't make that statement correct. The statement is still based on that fallacious, ridiculous, nonsensical garbage you posted up on the screen for 3 seconds earlier, and it still doesn't establish your posit. Still.
I certainly don't have the answers to all these questions, but if we look...
Or indeed any other questions, it seems. Ergo, you should stop attempting to answer anybody's questions. You are not competent. Still.
Look at the scientific evidence without any pre-existing...
You have no competence to talk about scientific evidence, clearly. Ergo, you should not attempt to do so.
Beliefs about sugar, it becomes obvious that this stuff is not as bad as one would think.
Well, depends on what one thinks. And one might think differently from another one. People wonder why I get frustrated reacting to and dealing with these kind of characters that make these ridiculous videos wherein they say nothing that has any veracity, utility, correctness. It's harmful, theological, propagandized nonsense. This is, by the sound of him, a very young man making statements about the absolute truth about something that he knows nothing about, it seems. It's ridiculous. Okay?
There's plenty of research showing how glucose and fructose actually negatively correlate with diabetes.
There are a lot of things that correlate with a lot of other things, both positively and negatively. However, in the first 30 minutes of your first undergraduate degree, if you've even done one of those, Christopher, they will have taught you that association cannot inform on cause nor effect. We're done with that. What's next?
And that fructose
confounds covariates, collinearities, basically render any ability null and void to make statements about causality on the basis of association. We're done.
Due to the fact that it's metabolized in the liver, doesn't need...
Still not a fact. Saying it's a fact. Okay, yes, most of it is. Not all of it, still.
Insulin to be pushed into the cells, which is probably why higher intakes of fructose have been found to improve insulin sensitivity.
Insulin sensitivity is a construct. It's an idea. It's a thing that is invoked by the powers that be, I guess, or the fraternity around this, in order to help them try to make sense of the objective reality of observations that are made. Nonetheless, it's not a physiological thing. Please give me the name of a company that I can contact today, Christopher, and order an insulin resistance meter, which is a thing that I can take the blood from a person and put in this machine, and it tells me what the insulin resistance is. It doesn't exist. You have to measure the area under the curve of glucose and insulin under various standardized challenges to get an idea of this. And that's what it is. It's an idea. It's a construct. And it's put forward as some kind of pathology, insulin resistance, when it isn't. It's just the normal functioning of the human body under the conditions of optimizing homeostasis. It's something we've known about since 1962, when Sir Philip Randall elucidated it. Perhaps you should look that up. So this is just rubbish. Yet more theological rubbish. Anti-scientific claptrap.
Bears coming out of hibernation actually fully reverse their
If you say actually, it makes it true.
full-blown diabetic state by eating.
Bears don't have a full-blown diabetic state when they come out of hibernation, stasis, over the winter months. Bears are not human beings. Bears have a different set of needs. They have different physiology. We're not a bear. Did you notice that? This is a bear. He's very cross, and rightly so, too. Goodness. Tell us how cross you are.
What, are you retarded?
Honey, which is a rich source of fructose. Oh, and then what about the claimed idea that sugar makes us fat? That's what everyone says.
No, that's not what everyone says. I don't say that. Okay, we're done with that. What's next?
Has anyone considered the fact that sugars are actually the primary fuel for the thyroid gland? Your thyroid gland requires glucose.
Yes, lucky we've got gluconeogenesis to take care of that. And to subserve our brain's requirement for glucose and the testes and several other tissues. That's why it's there, still. So we still don't need to consume any exogenous carbohydrates at all. Not 1 gram ever.
And that the thyroid gland actually controls the rate at which your body burns calories.
Once again, no, you can't burn calories. Burning is the oxidation of physical substances. Calories are not a physical substance. For goodness sake.
Your metabolic rate. When you eat
Metabolic rate is a fair statement to make. Yes, our metabolisms have a rate of operation, absolutely. And it's variable, yes, but so what?
more simple sugars, your thyroid gland produces more T4 thyroid hormones.
And why do you think it does that? Is that anything to do with the homeostatic mechanism according to the genetic instructions, those genes, and each one of us being the absolute pinnacle and peak of evolutionary process to this point? Yep, okay, good. What's next?
With the adequate sugar stored in the liver, your body can easily convert T4 into the active T3 form.
Luckily, our bodies can produce all the glucose we need for that purpose according to gluconeogenesis still. Good.
Which greatly improves energy production and metabolic.
No, we're not producing energy. No. Still.
Great. If sugars and carbohydrates make us fat, why in the world are almost all bodybuilders for the last 100 years, why have they all eaten high-carb diets while getting chiseled?
Well, a couple of reasons. First of all, they are misinformed by their coaches, mentors and things because it's an entrenched dogma, a fallacious and incorrect one, but nonetheless it still prevails, much in the same way that the fallacious and incorrect dogmas that you were referring to earlier about fats and lipids prevail. Doesn't mean they're correct. Secondly, what you'll find in hypertrophy athletes is that their metabolisms are encouraged by both their activity while they're doing the lifting and also by the fact that they have increased muscle mass. Their metabolic rates are increased by that. Ergo, the amount of mass being ejected, expelled, excreted in various forms from the body, according to the metabolic reactions of the mass that produces the, let's call it motive force to do metabolic work, is increased. Ergo, in terms of the mass in, mass out balance, not calories in, calories out, mass in, mass out, that means that those athletes tend to carry less fat than you would expect for a non-hypertrophy trained person who eats the same amount of sugar. Because again, the threshold of how much sugar is too much sugar is definitely individual, person to person, and also impacted by the situation in which that person's genes are placed. At any given time, as a function of where they have been placed in the past and ongoingly into the future, if you accept the existence of past and future. That's for another day. All right, that's why. Okay? Doesn't mean sugar is okay, because, glycation still occurs.
Heck, when you lower your calories in order to lose...
You can't lower your calories because you can't consume any calories. You can't consume less than nothing of any given thing. Not that calories are a thing. They're not a thing, as I've said. Ridiculous, Christopher. Absolute nonsense.
Lose weight, one of the most powerful compounds that can preserve metabolic rate is in fact fructose.
Well, I wonder why that is. Perhaps it's something to do with the fact that when you consume fructose, it drags down the ATP concentration in the liver, and ergo the body metabolism ramps up in order to offset that. Perhaps.
Supposedly is the substance most notorious for making us gain weight. However, in reality...
Yeah, well, that would be strange, wouldn't it, given the exact thing I've just mentioned, the dragging down of the ATP concentration, leading to the overconsumption, because no matter how much fructose you eat, you're never going to be satisfied. All else being equal, if fructose is the only thing you're consuming. Yeah, it just stuns me, really. It just stuns me how ignorant, how arrogant, how dripping with Dunning-Kruger most people that make videos online really are. It's absolutely appalling. Carry on, though.
It's pretty low in caloric content.
No, not caloric content. Calories are not contained in anything ever. Calories are brought into being when and only when they are released to entropy by being brought forth, made manifest as an excitation of the electromagnetic field, a wave in that field, disturbance in that field. Okay? An apple contains no calories. You can bring forth some calories from an apple by releasing those photons to entropy, by oxidizing it. But it does not contain them. Still.
The ability to greatly support metabolic rate and has a muscle-sparing effect. The liver...
According to whom, on the basis of what?
Provides about 70% of our active thyroid hormone by converting thyroxine to T3.
So, gluconeogenesis is still a thing.
But it can provide this active hormone only when it has adequate glucose.
Gluconeogenesis still.
So what about the fatty liver disease, the one...
Yes, the fatty liver disease that absolutely does seem to be more prevalent in people who overconsume fructose or alcohol.
Of the key evils that fructose is blamed for.
The absolutely demonstrable incidence rates, the increase in incidence of that condition, tied with the really quite clear mechanistic explanation for that phenomenon, it seems a bit of a slam dunk, really.
Well, in reality, fructose...
we'll say reality, and that changes what the reality actually is, does it?
Has been shown to be protective against hepatic liver issues.
Nonsense. No such thing as true. Protective is a cause and effect statement. There is no evidence to support that claim. You can't experiment on human beings still.
And when there's adequate choline in the...
You could talk to us about incidence, but then you'd have to analyse the paper that you just splashed up on the screen for a few seconds so that we could work out what's wrong with it. Because there will be stuff, and we'll probably find it within, well, I would find it within minutes. Because all of that stuff is poorly disciplined, poorly executed claptrap, pseudoscientific garbage. And the problem is you don't understand that. You think it's some kind of inviolate canon just because it's published somewhere. Laughable.
Diet, overfeeding of fructose does not lead to fat accumulation in the liver at all.
False. Demonstrably, absolutely, objectively false.
The problem of fatty liver disease has nothing to do with fructose.
Oh, well, our mistake.
And everything to do with eating too much polyunsaturated fatty acids.
According to whom, on the basis of what? I absolutely agree with you that polyunsaturated fatty acids are completely contraindicated in the human body. The exact amount of plant-based polyunsaturates that you should intake is none at all. I agree that plant-based polyunsaturates are likely to exacerbate the problem that we're talking about with the liver, but that is my opinion. You're spouting off facts or proposed facts, none of which are supportable with the epistemological, empirical data that would be required to establish those posits. Ergo, you need to stop making these videos.
Which actually prevent exportation of liver fat.
Prevent is a cause and effect statement, and putting actually in front of it added nothing whatsoever. It's still false.
And the lack of choline, which is a necessary micronutrient required in the exportation of fat from the liver.
Well, what's choline, and what do you think causes a lack of choline when a person has a lack of choline? Should we talk about that at all, or should we just want to brush over that to make it seem like you maybe have some clue of what you're talking about to a layperson that knows even less than you? Ridiculous.
As well. Lastly, you may have heard a stupendous amount of authors and mommy bloggers
Stupendous amount. Very scientific.
Going around in circles saying that sugar would be toxic.
Yes, well, anything can be toxic if the dose is right and the conditions are right for that to be toxic in that person at that time, yep.
That it would increase oxidative damage and inflammation in the body. However, research shows that simple sugar...
Research shows, no, it doesn't. Whatever you're going to say next. It doesn't matter what you're going to say next. Research does not, in fact, show any such thing. Let's hear it, though.
Sugars actually have the antioxidative effects.
No, they don't. False. How on earth do you think sugar is able to act as an antioxidant? Goodness gracious.
Improving the antioxidant capacity of cells in their...
Improving is a cause and effect statement. Where does that come from? Who told you that?
Therefore, reducing inflammation and oxidative stress.
Oxidative stress. Define that for us, please. What is that? According to whom, on the basis of what?
About that claim that sugar is toxic.
It is, at a certain level in certain people. That's usually measured using the A1C value in terms of the damage that it does to the blood cells, for example. That's a toxic effect. So sugar can be toxic. We're done with that. What's next?
Seriously, how many times have you heard someone actually getting poisoned by sugar?
Well, A1C is an example. Also, reactive hypoglycemia if you take in truckloads and truckloads of sugar, which can be fatal much more quickly than A1C damage. Okay, there you go. That was easy. What's next?
Often our kids rush to the ER and
I'll tell you what. Give a child of small body mass, say under 50 pounds, give them 2 or 3 pounds of sugar, make sure they consume it all at once, and see how long it is before you're in the ER. For goodness sake, Christopher.
Sugar poisoning after Halloween, for example. It's just a ridiculous claim.
Well, what's ridiculous, actually, Christopher, is you putting yourself forward as being remotely competent to speak publicly about anything to do with sugar, metabolism, nutrition, or any of this. It's a joke. It's a laughable joke. It's ridiculous.
Sugar is the primary source of energy that our cells...
No, still. No. Source of energy? No.
Crave. It's widespread in the most natural foodstuffs.
Oh, natural, it must be right then, still. Just saying the same ridiculous, fallacious nonsense again and again and again and again in a short video of 13 minutes length does not make those fallacious, ridiculous, arrogant, ignorant comments correct. They still aren't.
And simple sugars are the main fuel for the master gland that controls our metabolic rate and energy production.
Luckily, we're able to produce all the sugar we need for those purposes ourselves. Gluconeogenesis still. Ergo, we still require not 1 single gram of exogenous carbohydrates in our diets ever. Still.
Thyroid. Glucose and fructose have antioxidant-like effects.
No, they don't. Who told you that?
In reality, they don't contribute...
Oh, if you say in reality, that changes what the reality actually is, does it, Christopher? No.
to fatty liver disease at all unless there's a deficiency of choline, which prevents the exportation of...
You've already said this, and why don't you tell us what causes a deficiency in choline, perhaps? Once you've told us what choline even is. That might be handy, since you're talking to people who clearly have IQs below 40. Anyone that will believe your nonsense. Goodness gracious.
Fat from the liver. So really, what are we afraid of here?
Well, I'm afraid of several things in life, really, rightly or wrongly, logically or not. I'm afraid of flying. I don't want to do it. I hate it. Makes me feel very uncomfortable. I don't like being out of control. I'm afraid of death for the same reasons, and because the ultimate end of everything seems to be, a terrifying thing, given that I don't believe that there's an afterlife and a consciousness that prevails after the body ceases to function. Does that mean I'm right on either of those things? Well, who knows? I'm not suggesting people should be afraid of sugar. I'm suggesting that, several things. Number one, the exact dietary requirement for the intake of exogenous sugar in human beings is not 1 single gram ever. It is my opinion, based on my significant understandings of biochemistry, nutritional requirements, etc., that the ideal amount of sugar for any given individual to intake for the average Joe or Josephine is none at all. In practice, there are some people who seem to do better with maybe up to 50 grams a day for various reasons. Mostly those reasons center around metabolic damage that those people have done earlier in life before they realized that they should stop pouring so much carbohydrate down their neck. And we have to work with that situation until we can get their metabolic health back in shape. But still, the biological design of a human being, they do not require, biologically, they do not require any carbs. Ergo, given that carbs definitely do damage, A1C is an example, reactive hyperglycemia is another, heart disease, it seems, again, that's my opinion based on significant understanding of cardiovascular pathophysiology. One of the things I did teach at professorial level, at the university level, okay? Inflammatory burden, overburden, definitely linked to the intake of sugars. Why would you do it? You don't need it. Gluconeogenesis is still a thing. It still takes care of it. Even if you're an athlete, even if you're a high-intensity athlete, even if you're a hypertrophy athlete, it still takes care of it. Once you are properly adapted, which can take a significant period, especially if you've done quite a bit of metabolic damage hitherto. All right? See how I caveat all my statements with clear, these are the caveats, these are the conditional correctness of what I'm saying, such that nobody can come to me and say you're wrong. Because I'm not. Okay? That's what you should have done. That's where you fell down. That and listening to people you shouldn't be. Still.
So let's go back to the very first thing that I said.
Why are we going back to things? Literally. Why? Are we too stupid to understand the first time?
In this video, sugar is the ultimate antioxidant.
That's still false. That is still wrong. You still haven't supported that claim remotely. You've given us a ridiculous theology.
What does that even mean? Glucose actually plays a vitally important role in the production of glutathione.
Yeah, and again, it's lucky that gluconeogenesis is still a thing. Okay?
So we actually have a complex endogenous antioxidant system that is ultimately fueled by glucose.
Yes, but that glucose need not come from exogenous intake. Still.
Through the pentose phosphate pathway, glucose supplies hydrogen ions and electrons.
No, it doesn't. No. Hydrogen ions do not exist in biological aqueous solutions. For goodness sake.
Electrons, which we would call reducing power to NADPH, which is derived from niacin, which is also known as vitamin B3.
Yeah, so what?
The enzyme glutathione reductase uses riboflavin, also known as vitamin B2, to pass this reducing power on to glutathione.
Yes, so what?
Glutathione, the master endogenous antioxidant.
That's a value judgment statement. That's a theological belief structure. Who told you that? On the basis of what?
Then uses this reducing power to neutralize hydrogen peroxide to water, to neutralize lipid peroxidases to less harmful hydroxy fatty acids, and to recycle vitamin C.
Yeah, so what?
Vitamin C recycles vitamin E, the principal defense against lipid peroxidation in cellular membranes.
Yes, all correct facts. Great. Congratulations. So what?
Thus, the multiple roles of glutathione within the antioxidant defense system, mitigating the accumulation of reactive oxygen.
Yeah, luckily, gluconeogenesis is still a thing. So your point is what?
She's protecting vulnerable fatty acids within the cellular membranes and cleaning up any damage that has slipped through the system, and are ultimately supported by reducing power derived from the glucose. I also want to highlight one last very important point.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's your last point.
I'm by no means advocating an excess consumption of anything.
Okay, well, how much is excess and of what? Because the excess of various different things is different.
In fact, I've always advocated the opposite, in trying to seek a balanced macronutrient.
There it is. Okay, so we should have a balance of, if you don't qualify that, then we need to say equal amounts of fats, proteins, carbohydrates, and alcohol. Because balance is indicated. None of those things are toxic. None of those things are contraindicated for intake. None of those things could potentially kill us. Actually, all of them could. But the amount that we would need to intake for that death to occur differs for different parts of subsets of those four things. Ergo, some of those things are indicated in the diet and some of them are not. Isn't it great how logic works when you actually apply some? You tell us we need balance though, because balance is a great bit of propaganda.
Consumption across the board, since that's truly what the full breadth of research on human metabolism and hormonal health actually suggests.
Well, it does not, in fact, actually. No, it doesn't. False, theological, ridiculous nonsense again. Go and look up Sir Philip Randall. The glycerol fatty acid cycle, 1963. You'll learn a lot. Well, maybe you will. If you had some competence to read scientific literature, you might. It seems you don't. And once again, we're going to splash the page of some journal article from somewhere up and tell us that that somehow supports your claim about what the totality of evidence, so-called, says. Goodness gracious! This is why I get frustrated, kiddies. All right, I hope this is going up the flagpoles. I really do. I hope we're learning a lot.
Many people will advocate that you stop eating or drastically increase or reduce the entire macronutrient group.
Right. And in the case of, for example, carbohydrates and alcohol, the reduction of those things to as close as zero in the diet as possible is absolutely patently indicated, it would seem, on the balance of the inferences that do exist, in fact. Okay?
Certain things like never eat carbs or never eat fat and that sort of stuff that everyone says.
Everyone says that, do they? Righto. No, they don't.
If you run into this type of poorly researched advice, I would...
Poorly researched. Game with the projection there, Christopher? Seriously, son. Close down your channel. Stop making videos. This is beyond laughable. That's why I'm not laughing. Well, I am on the inside. Maybe.
I would advise you to run the opposite direction.
I would advise everyone that listens to Christopher Walker to stop doing that immediately. I would suggest you unsub from Christopher Walker and come and sub to me. Or if you don't like me, try Dr. Anthony Chafee. He's pretty good too. He'd be my next go-to. But you need to stop listening to Christopher Walker today. This has been absolutely appalling from start to finish. Not a single thing Christopher has had to say in this video is remotely correct or indicated or of any utility. It's just been theological claptrap garbage and nonsense from start to finish. Not a single logical proposition he's put forward stands up to even cursory refutation. Stunningly poor.
Seriously question who is giving you this advice.
Yes, I would seriously question who you get advice from too, and I suggest you should not get it from Christopher Walker.
In excess of anything, by definition, is imbalanced and typically leads down a dead-end road.
Yes, like alcohol and carbohydrates. The amount of alcohol and carbohydrates that are apparently problematic and toxic to a human being are quite considerably low. Ergo, those are the amounts of those things that you should consume. Okay? Still.
When you run into a dead end, you will always need to put the car in reverse.
Again, with the ridiculous, vacuous analogies.
And come back to where you started. So instead of wasting more time, it'd be in all of our best interest to start approaching nutrition with more balance.
No. False. Balance is not what's required in human nutrition. Correctness is what's required. You should eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which is not balanced in terms of macronutrient requirements or intakes. Irrespective of what Christopher Walker has to say about it in his ignorant, arrogant, Dunning-Kruger dripping opinion.
Especially since the basic foundations of human biochemistry and the full context of research on hormones supports this.
Which you have absolutely no competence to comment on whatsoever, Christopher. None at all. I think I've shown that quite patently in this video. Your ability to construct even basic logical constructs. Absolutely destitute. Do come and have a debate-style discussion with me about this. It'll get great numbers, as I said.
Notion. With healthy hormones and a fast metabolism, all of people's typical fat loss, muscle building, and sexual health goals can be achieved.
Okay, who's to say a fast metabolism, whatever that means, is the goal? And who's to say what the ideal hormonal balance is? Because your genes will do absolutely everything they possibly can to maintain your homeostasis in that regard. So they'll adjust upwards and downwards the amounts of various hormones at various times under various circumstances, precisely in order to subserve that lofty goal. 13,800 million years of evolution or so. And I know I'm talking about the proposed age of the universe there, not the planet Earth. I'm aware of that, Christopher, and others. As it turns out, it seems that the estimate on the age of the universe was false by 100%. It seems like it's at least twice that old, in fact. And secondly, it's completely unreasonable, A, to imagine that life only exists on this planet and started on this planet some 3,800 million years ago, give or take. And it's also, I think, in my opinion, completely unreasonable to believe that life was not delivered here from elsewhere, transspermia, on a rock. Okay? That's just my opinion, though. However, the facts are, we are, each one of us, the pinnacle of the evolutionary process to this point, however long that's been. And it's been long enough, irrespective of my opinion on that. The genes know what they're doing. Okay? Right, so there we go. There's Christopher Walker's attempt at telling us all about the sugar, though. Did he deal with the actual posit in the title of his video at all? Lose weight fast eating sugar. No, he didn't even mention that at all. In a 13-minute video, no mention it at all. Sugar obesity myth exposed. Well, no, what was exposed, Christopher, was your destitution of competence to speak publicly about any aspect of nutrition, science, or metabolic process. You correctly identified a few aspects of human metabolism and spoke about this reacts with that when you were talking near the end about various different things. but you didn't have any context or any understanding of the meaning of any of that, and everything you said prior to that was absolute garbage, wasn't it? Thanks for joining me, darlings. I hope that it wasn't too unbearable that I didn't swear at the boy. I hope it wasn't too unbearable, all the pausing and stuff. If it was, sorry about that. I'm not for you. You need to listen to somebody else who isn't so insistent on correcting fallacies as and when. All right? Join me next time when someone else will be wrong on interwebs, because it does not look like slowing down, does it? No, sir. See you then.